Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check the link above to my Patreon page. So I'm here with a replay of a match. Sorry I've been away from the channel for a little while. I know I've been saying that a lot lately, but I pretty much finished my blue-green Merfolk testing. And I know I didn't upload recent gameplay, but that's just because it was kind of depressing. I tried different numbers of lands, different combinations of cards, and in the end, I wasn't really loving blue-green. It just felt like it was fighting against itself with the mana base. The addition of Kumena Speaker and Merfolk Mistbinder as aggressive 1 and 2 drops, I don't think that it made the deck better than Master of Waves makes mono blue. Master of Waves as a 4-drop gives us an amazing top deck that synergizes really well with Spreading Seas, and that kind of late game power and sort of synergy is really missing from the blue-green version of Merfolk. So apologies to those of you who are really into blue-green, but I'm off it for now. I'm back on mono blue, and that's what I'll be playing in this video here. So with all that said, let's go ahead and look at the opening hands here. I won the die roll. So this is an easy keep. An opponent can take our second Aether Vial. It's not a huge deal, but if they don't, turn 1, turn 2 Aether Vial, even without drawing another land, is usually pretty great, especially since we have a nice curve of creatures in our hand. All right, Temple Garden could be a couple of things. It could be a few things. It could be Bogles. It could be collected, the devoted company, I guess. It could also be Bant Knightfall. What else could it be? A few other random decks, maybe Kiki Chord. All right, so opponent plays Temple Garden. Now this Hierarch obviously takes them off of possibly playing Bogles, so we're just putting him on Devoted Company now, probably. So didn't draw land, but well, I guess Kira's not very good against Devoted Company. So we'll just run out the Vial here and pass the turn. We can play Cursecatcher with AEther Vial at the end of the turn. Opponent's not going to have mana to go for Collected Company. Okay, so turn 2, Knight of the Reliquary. Probably Bant Knightfall now. As I said, end step, I'm going to just put the Cursecatcher in. Now, this guy's a 3/3. If we draw a land, we might be able to attack in to get 2 lords on the table, but let's see how it goes. Aether Vial on 2 and Aether Vial on 1. So Reejerey is interesting because it might make our Aether Vials more productive, since I was planning on ticking it up for Kira and Master of Waves anyway. But can't attack here since we won't be able to get 2 lords on the table to line up against the 3/3 knight. All right, so opponent. So the turn 3 combo online. Let's take a look at Retreat to Coralhelm. So it's a landfall card from Battle for Zendikar, I think. It's got pretty awesome art. And it says, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you can untap or tap target creature or scry 1. So what they're typically looking to do is play fetch lands. And when the fetch land enters, a trigger goes on the stack for this. They'll tap the Knight of the Reliquary, sacrifice a forest or a plains, go get another fetch land. When that lands, it gets another trigger. And basically every fetch land gets 2 triggers, and the Knight gets to untap multiple times. Noble Hierarch gets to generate mana a bunch of times. So basically this guy gets really big for every land that goes in the graveyard, and then they can get something, well basically they can get Kessig Wolfrun. They can make red mana with like a single Stomping Grounds or Birds of Paradise. And then this guy will already be like a 15/15, and then with any mana netted with Noble Hierarch, they can just pump him up with Trample with Kessig Wolfrun and just basically win on this turn right now. So at this point, I was wishing that I had a Harbinger in my hand. Some lists play like Sejiri Step to give the knight protection from blue before he even goes into combat. So I don't have any outs right now, except to hope that the opponent doesn't really play the deck very well. So there's a fetch land, and I'm going to do these first few ones a little slow. So he is untapping knight here, and he's going to crack this. Get a forest. He's going to target the Noble Hierarch, generate 1 green mana, let the trigger resolve. So he's going to repeat this process a bunch of times. So now he's getting mana from the forest. Taps both of his creatures. He's going to get a fetch land. He can target those creatures and untap them. So he's just generating a bunch of mana here. Now he got a Stomping Grounds. Remember, there's usually only one of those in the deck because there's not really red spells in the deck. They just use it for Kessig Wolfrun. So untapping Hierarch. So sacking the Stomping Ground seems very strange to me because, or at least I was surprised during the match, because as I just mentioned, they tend to only play one of them, and it's part of their win condition. They don't have a Birds of Paradise right now on the board to generate red mana, so I'm not sure what line he's going for here. I mean, I'm not an expert on the deck, so it's totally possible that there's some line that I don't know about. All right, so he's tapping my creature down this time. Knight is already a 9/9. 10/10, he's got 2 fetches. Note that his life total is getting lower as he does this. He cracks all these fetches. Now, I checked a few lists for Knight Bantfall, and they tend to run something like 7 or 8 fetches. So those are the real powerhouses of this combo because they get 2 triggers from Retreat to Coralhelm every single time one of them enters the battlefield. So he's playing a Ramunap Excavator, who lets him play lands from his graveyard. Now, it's a bit of a non-bow with the Knight on its face because it takes lands out of the graveyard, but typically the lands will go right back in. For example, with Horizon Canopy, he can sack it to draw a card, and then he can replay it every turn with Ramunap Excavator if he feels like drawing cards is what he wants to be doing. So it really isn't much of a non-bow with Knight. So let's continue. So he sacked the Horizon Canopy to draw a card. He's still got another fetch on the battlefield to get more triggers if he wants them. He's playing another Knight using that floating mana here. And let's just check how many fetches he has in his graveyard. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fetches so far. So he's probably got like 2 or 3 more. He's got a 13 right now. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, if I counted correctly. I think the deck has like 22 lands. So let's say that there's like 9 more lands. I'm not quite sure why he doesn't just keep digging for lands and make a 20-20 here, or like a 22-22 or something. His life total might go a little bit lower, but he's got me on the ropes. With this fetch land, he can tap down my creatures. Let's see, if he goes to combat and I play a creature, he can crack the Misty Rainforest, maybe get another fetch. That trigger would tap the Lord that I would put in as a blocker, but then he could crack the fetch, get maybe another fetch land if he has it, untap the Knight, and then keep going off from there. Like he could basically get... no, I guess it would end at some point because he's going to run out of fetches, right? If he just gets a forest, see, if he taps the Knight to sack whatever land this gets. Well, let's see, he'd get a forest. No, that'd be fine. He'd get a forest. That would target the Knight. He could untap the Knight, sack the forest, but maybe they only run so many forests. Anyhow, the guy chose to go to combat here, I think, with a 13-13. Comes 14-14 because of the Noble Hierarch. I'm going to put the Lord in, and... you know, at this point, he's got 2 13-13s, and I feel like I have to throw the Lord under the bus. And it might just be in this guy's favor just to let me chump. Like, what am I gaining from chumping? I just prevent taking 15 damage or something. So he went and got an island, which is probably the stupidest thing he could possibly do. Okay, tapping the Lord. He wants me to take this 15 damage. Nothing I can do about it then. So, we got another turn. I said last turn that I thought I had no outs, and here we are. So I'm going to take both of these vials up. I've got 3 drops and 2 drops. So Land is welcome, but I'm not going to be able to play anything with that right now. At least it can make another blocker. Now, the guy just did give me access to Island Walk by fetching that breeding pool. It's possible it's like his only forest or plains left, but I don't think so. He doesn't have too many of them in his graveyard. So I think the line here is to get... I want to get Kira onto the table because this guy's running out of lands. Probably in his graveyard. I mean, in his deck. At least he's probably running out of fetch lands to really... get the combo going in overdrive. So if I play Kira with Aether Vial, it's going to be hard for him to successfully tap my creatures down. Mutavault can serve as a good chump blocker, as can Cursecatcher. And then I can hope to get to next turn, my turn 5, and get a Master of Waves out onto the table, at which point it might become kind of impossible for him to tap down all of my elemental tokens, and I can have a good number of chump blockers for these Knights of the Reliquary. I have to say, on a resolved Knight and Retreat to Coralhelm combo on the board, I can't remember a situation where I've won from that position because it just becomes so difficult to fight. The guy has 2 Knights. Even if I bounced one with a Harbinger, he'd still have a 14/14. He can still go get Kessig Wolfrun, he can get Gavany Township and make his guys bigger that way. It just becomes extremely, extremely difficult. And the other mode of Retreat to Coralhelm is scrying. So with these fetch lands, he could also just scry some win condition to the top of the deck. As it stands, I'm just trying to get another turn. So I'm going to put Kira onto the table. And since I'm not going to block with my Island Walk Lords anyway, I want to put another Lord onto the table and just swing in with this Lord. Just, lower the opponent's life total a little bit in the event that this breeding pool somehow sticks around and we get another opportunity to swing with Island Walk. Or even without Island Walk, it's going to be easier to win, obviously, if the opponent's at a lower life total. At this point, I'm thinking about Cursecatcher and Mutavault as convenient chump blockers. I'd rather not block with Kira because that's going to make it easier for the opponent to tap down my blockers, and he does have 2 14/14s on the table. So, opponent realized that he gave me Island Walk, I guess, so he sacks the breeding pool right away after floating green and gets a Ghost Quarter. Now, I should have seen this coming and activated Mutavault like during the opponent's draw step, but I realized immediately that this is a threat to one of my chump blockers, and I tried to activate Mutavault. The opponent probably should have Ghost Quartered it in response to me activating it, but he probably thought, whatever, I'll get him later. But activating Mutavault, if the opponent doesn't respond right away, Mutavault becomes a creature and gets Kira's protection. Now, the opponent didn't Ghost Quarter him in response, so Mutavault got Kira's protection. So obviously not playing against the most experienced opponent, but again, I could just not be seeing lines that he sees. All right, so there's a Birds of Paradise that he plays with the green mana floated from Breeding Pool, and he's just going straight into combat. So maybe this chump block plan is going to work out. Now remember, he sacrificed his Stomping Grounds. The Birds of Paradise has Summoning Sickness, so there's really no threat of Kessig Wolfrun at this point. So chumps should be good. All right, so I'm going to throw Cursecatcher and Mutavault onto the bus. Sorry, guys, but I'm going to have a ton of devotion here. The opponent played another Ghost Quarter. Going to get a trigger to untap this Knight, and let's see if he does any more crazy land shenanigans. Now it looks like he just passes the turn here. Now Ghost Quarter is good protection for these decks against Spreading Seas. If I go after his Temple Garden, of course the opponent could just sack it in response with Knight of the Reliquary, but if I draw more Spreading Seas and put it on his lands, Ghost Quarter can always just destroy that land. So I'm going to take both of these Aether Vials up. Aether Vial is doing a really excellent job of keeping me in this game. Now that's a great card, but I need lands for that. So I think the best approach here is just to sort of ambush the opponent. I'm going to attack with Kira. I'm not going to block with her because, as I mentioned a couple times now, she's helping us out a lot here by not letting these Knights just tap down our couple of blockers. Okay, opponent just went straight to combat after drawing. This could be pretty good for us, actually. So they get in with the knights. After declaring attacks, I'm going to put in Reejerey. Now, the order of this doesn't matter too much because we could put Master in first, and then with the trigger on the stack, put Reejerey in. The opponent's not playing, or at least they can't cast right now. Or, no, they could cast Vendilion Click, which is one of the few things we need to look out for with an AEther Vial activation on the stack. If I tapped AEther Vial to put Master of Waves in, and the opponent responded with Vendilion Click, I'd be a little bit screwed. So in that case, you would want to activate the 3 first, so that Vendilion Click, well, in that case, Vendilion Click would probably still leave the Reejerey in hand and take the Master of Waves. Fortunately, the opponent is not playing a deck that can support Vendilion Click. So here is Master of Waves being protected by Kira, bringing 8 tokens. So it's pretty good for us. The opponent taps white mana, floats white mana, and then Ghost Quarters his Temple Garden. Now, he's looking at his library, and for some reason he doesn't get a basic land. He's got white floating, so no land entered the battlefield. I thought the line there was to get a basic land, target Master of Waves with a retreat trigger, tapping him, and then use a path if they have a path with Kira's shield broken to get rid of Master of Waves. Now that would have been a blowout because then I'd have to start blocking with Lords, and unless I draw another Master of Waves, I would probably lose the game. But the opponent didn't get a basic land. So he's going to pass the blocks. He loses his floating white mana, and I get to throw 2 elementals in front of these guys. Okay, that might explain it. The opponent plays a Plains second main phase. So it looks like they probably just play 3 forests and 2 basic plains. So that's hilarious. The opponent had his other plains in his hand, so he couldn't get a retreat trigger during combat using Ghost Quarter. So that's it's pretty incredible, actually, the way that this worked out for me. At this point, the opponent gets a trigger. Obviously, they're just going to target Master of Waves and then hit him with a Path to Exile. Kind of stinks for us, but we have pretty big creatures here. I actually think we're pretty well lined up for our next turn at this point. Another Birds of Paradise takes a blocker away and adds a blocker, so ultimately for us the net is 0 there going into this turn. Now note that the path did give us an island, which is huge because we have this Lord in our hand. AEther Vials on 4 and 3, not so useful unless we top deck something. Silvergill. So the line here is just to play the Lord, use Reejerey to tap one of their blockers, and you guys may have gotten ahead of me with the math, but when this guy hits the table, all my Lords are going to be 5/5s, and then I've got Kira in the air. So block 2 of the Lords, and he's only going to block 2 of the Lords, and he's going to take 7 no matter what for exact lethal. So this was a pretty ridiculous game. As I mentioned, I don't think I've ever won against a Resolved Retreat Knight combo. It's possible that I have in the past, like with a Dismember or something really well timed, or a Harbinger, something like that. But Master of Waves was a huge help. I had extremely well timed chump blockers, and we got there in game 1. It was pretty ridiculous and shouldn't have happened. I think I had a slightly inexperienced opponent. But yeah, Merfolk up a game against Bant Knightfall. I'm going to go ahead to game 2, so look away for a second if you don't want to see the match result. That is actually a list, so you can look back for a second. This is brought up a typical list for Bant Knightfall. Now, this one doesn't have Ramanap Excavator, but we can look at their lands here. Gavany Township as a singleton, extremely powerful in these lists that can generate this 4 mana really, really easily and buff their whole team. Eventually, Birds of Paradise start getting really, really big. You know, what happens is they can activate End Step and then untap and then activate it again. So all their creatures are getting +2/+2, and a lot of times that's just too much. Kessig Wolfrun to give any creature, usually Knight of the Reliquary, trample. But they do need that red mana for it. You can see that they only have the 1 Stomping Grounds, and my opponent sacrificed that at the beginning of their turn 3 when they were going off with the Knight. And you can see 4 Birds of Paradise in this list to make red mana. Pretty much nothing else that does it. Oh, this is actually a Collected Company list. I wonder if my opponent is playing Collected Company or if all of these decks play Collected Company. As I mentioned, I'm not an expert in this particular deck. I have a sort of general understanding of the way that it tries to win. Spell Queller seems like gas. It pretty much requires us to have AEther Vial on the table to get any of our creatures out. Yeah, Kazali Pridemage is really good against us. Blessed Alliance can be really tricky if, like a couple of times in that game when I attacked with Kira by herself, Blessed Alliance could make me sacrifice my only attacking creature. That I've gotten blown out like that before. So yeah, looking at this list, basically, I think the most interesting thing is seeing the number of fetches they have. In this case, it's 8. The number of basics they have. There's 3 forests and 1 plain, so that's definitely something that hurt the opponent in that game 1. And then the win conditions of Gavany Township and Keswick Wolfrun. Lists run different numbers of Ghost Quarters. Now, Ghost Quarters is a pretty cool card in this list because they can target their own lands to get more triggers out of Retreat to Coralhelm. All right, so back to the game. I'm going to go to game 2. The opponent's going to be on the play here. So let's see how our opening hand looks. Now, no AEther Vial, but this is solid because we've got, the Lords and the Island Walk combo. Spell Pierce can hit Retreat to Coralhelm, and maybe Collected Company if they play it. All right, this deck has lots and lots of mana dorks, so there is a turn 1 Bird's Paradise, not very surprising. A turn 1 AEther Vial, that's pretty solid. I was thinking about leaving up Spell Pierce to try to hit a turn 2 Retreat, but if they have a choice between Retreat and Knight on turn 2, they're going to play the Knight first, so that he'll be able to attack on turn 3. So of course, getting AEther Vial out, really important for us to start developing tempo. Opponent, another fetch, and there's the Knight on turn 2, right on time. So for my turn 2, I have a tough decision because last game, the opponent jammed Retreat on turn 3 and just started going bananas with 15/15 Knight of the Reliquaries. I drew a Reejerey for the turn. He's not going to come out for a while. Now, this is really tricky. I started thinking that maybe bringing Spell Pierce or leaving Spell Pierce in the deck was a mistake because it puts me in these weird situations. I'm playing against a deck that's something like 50% creatures. The rest, like a third or more, or 20 cards, 22 cards are lands, and maybe the 8 cards remaining are something like 4 Retreat to Coralhelms and 4 Collected Companies, right? So a small percentage of the deck that can be hit by Spell Pierce. But at the same time, I have a chance to really put the opponent off their game if they just jam Retreat next turn. I can counter it, and then we're totally just in the driver's seat with multiple Lords and Island Walk. So I play an Island and decided to pass here, giving up some of the tempo that I'm developing with AEther Vial, hoping that I get the opponent to play a non-creature spell. But this doesn't look like a good start. They play Noble Hierarch. They're going to get in with Exalted. Probably sack a land before damage. Looks like he does. Tap Stomping Grounds, and I'm set to take 6. So that was a really terrible turn 2 for me. We can just, I guess, learn from this that, again, against this particular deck, I don't think leaving Spell Pierce in is correct. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this. I did bring in 2 negates. Let me go ahead and show you guys my sideboard here. So what I took out, and I adjusted this for game 3 for sure, I took out 4 Cursecatchers because, again, there's not a lot of non-creature things to counter. In this deck in particular, it might just be Collected Company, maybe a Path to Exile or Blessed Alliance. 2 Reejereys and 2 Master of Waves. So ultimately cutting 8 cards from the main. No, so I cut 1 Spell Pierce, so 9. I brought in 2 Negates, 2 Dismembers, 2 Echoing Truths. That's 6 cards, and then 3 Relic of Progenitus. So all of those cards are really good against this deck. But going into game 3, I'll show you my sideboard again. I did take out the second Spell Pierce. Okay, so anyhow, going to my turn 3, feel pretty bad about passing with my not using my mana on turn 2. Kira is an interesting draw because she was so clutch in game 1. You know, I can play her this turn, get a Lord onto the table, and get the other Lords on the table after her. I'm not blocking this Knight at this point, so it just seems the best to get Kira on the table. After having played a land and Noble Hierarch, Spell Pierce has already been outclassed. If the opponent goes for Retreat next turn, they can just pay for it very easily. The 2 mana tax. So I decided that leaving mana up for Spell Pierce is not a priority. And there's another land, so very, very easily paying for Spell Pierce. Well, another Knight is not the worst. You know, we can always block these guys or bounce them with Harbinger. So opponent getting in with Exalted again. 6/6, and I am not going to block this. We can go down to 8. On my turn, I can, sorry, at the end of the opponent's turn, I can put a Lord in. I think I'm going to tick Vial up here. And drew a land, not that great. So I'm going to just get Reejerey on the table. Play out a Lord. Untap a land. We don't have good attacks here since their Knights are really good, really big. I could tap down this guy and swing for a few points, but then I'm going to be left with only a couple of Lords as blockers. So we are not on the offensive right now. I'm just hoping to draw into a good creature here to be able to continue going off with Reejerey. I'm sorry, not draw. I'm going to play Spreading Seas, which from that I hope to draw a creature. Now it doesn't let me untap, but I do have another land in hand. I did sideboard out my Cursecatchers, I remember realizing during this turn, so not going to be able to develop my board presence any further here, but still we could potentially hit something good here. Silvergill is all right, but I just ticked my AEther Vial up, so it's pretty awkward. You know, the opponent has mana up for Blessed Alliance, but I am so far on the back foot that I think I'm just going to attack with Kira here. And if the opponent gets her with the Blessed Alliance, you know, so be it. So what do they have lined up here now? They just passed through their combat. Really interesting. Now, I do have Spreading Seas. I do have Island Walk set up now. So you know what? Actually, it may have been correct to swing with one of my Island Walk Lords. But then, you know, again, we're not on the offensive. If the opponent came back at me with 2 big Knights and I'm at 8 life, no, I think not attacking is correct. The opponent, if they don't attack with their Knights, they can leave them up to crack one of their lands, sacrifice one of their lands, and go get a Ghost Quarter to take me off of Island Walk. Opponent, pretty defensive turn for them. Here's a Kitchen Finks. More defense, just gaining some life. We need a really good draw here. I think I'm going to tick my AEther Vial up, or maybe I'll just leave it at 3. I think I'll tick it up. Nope, leave it at 3. So that land was very poor, but at least it lets me get the Silvergill on the board. I think at this point I just untap the land because again we're not attacking. I could draw, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm not playing Vapor Snag. I could draw a Dismember. Sort of decent right here. Although, yeah, not that great because these guys are already 5/5s, and if I try to target them, they can just sacrifice a land and they become 6/6s. But still, nothing else to do. Oh, you know what? I don't know. They could take me off Island Walk. I was thinking I could attack with Island Walk, get some points of damage in, and then post-combat untap my Island Walk guy. But as I mentioned, they can take me off Island Walk very easily here. So let's see. Drawing another Reejerey would be really good here. As you saw, though, I did sideboard out a couple of my Reejereys. That guy's okay, but the opponent is starting to apply a lot of pressure. Let's get in with this Kira again, because I'd rather not block with her. So sack a forest, and Gavany Township is one of their win conditions. They get to make their guys bigger, and then untap, and make them bigger again if they want. Okay, so there are already 9/9s after sacking some lands, and activating Gavany Township. A Rising Canopy, and straight to combat. Swinging with just one of these guys gives me some kind of out. Now, I think what I was thinking here is like, I need my lords, so let's just throw Silvergill under the bus. Now I was doing all this math through the whole match, and then sort of forgot for a moment about Kessig Wolfrun, which is really dumb because it's one of their main win conditions. And I saw that they had no red mana, but then of course they have the Birds of Paradise out. So I lost track of the Birds of Paradise. An easy mistake to make, but that doesn't really excuse it. So the opponent's going to be able to make like a big trampling guy here. Now the only way I could have prevented losing here, it was going to be a 17-17. And I'm at 8. So I needed to prevent 10 of the damage and only take... Wait, so 17-17. Yeah, prevent 10 and only take 7. I can go down to 1. Preventing 10 would mean throwing 2 lords under the bus. Which puts me in a really, really poor position. They have another knight. They have active Gavanese and Kessig Wolfrun on the table. So, I did pass on my turn 2. I don't know ultimately if it lost me the game. They could have taken me off of Island Walk whenever they wanted. And it was just a difficult game 2 for me to win, especially with a couple of poor sideboarding decisions. Master of Waves is kind of a trump card in this matchup, and I really shouldn't sideboard any of them out. Let's go ahead to game 3. Look away if you don't want to see the match result. Okay, back with game 3. I'm going to be on the play, which is a huge help. Now this looks okay. AEther Vial is nice to see. Going to be able to do things like Harbinger at instant speed. Let's go ahead and look at the sideboard quickly to see what I changed. Now you can see I only have 1 Reejerey and 1 Master of Waves taken out here, whereas earlier I had taken out 2 each of them, and now 4 Cursecatchers and 2 Spell Pierces taken out. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I took 1 Kira out, so that's 9. Now Kira is good, but I still have 1 in the deck. 2 is, this deck doesn't run a lot of spot removal like Bant Knightfall, right? And tapping down my creatures is not really super necessary since they often just go over the top with Trample with Wolfrun. So Kira's okay, but not super necessary. So I think that this sideboarding strategy is getting closer, but in the future, I think I would probably cut 2 Reejereys before, before cutting any Master Waves. And taking a sip of water. Because Bant Knightfall, it's sort of plan B. Well, plan A is the combo. Plan B is just go wide and just stomp the opponent. Master of Waves goes wider than they go. So it's sort of, as I mentioned, just a trump card in the matchup. So I wish I had taken out 2 Reejereys instead of any number of Master Waves. But I brought in 2 Dismembers, 2 Echoing Truths, 2 Negates, and 3 Relic of Progenitus. So 9 cards in, 9 cards out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So pretty solid sideboard plan against this deck. Island AEther Vial, and the opponent kept 7. We're almost certainly going to see a Mana Dork. We like seeing the opponent take 3 life. So tick AEther Vial up. Another Lord is excellent. I'll just play one of those guys right now. Means next turn we're going to be able to at least play a 2-drop and AEther Vial in another 2-drop. Okay, so turn 2 Ramanap Excavator is a much more welcome sight than either the Retreat or Knight of the Reliquary. Now this guy is a 2-3. He's not going to line up well against our 3-3 Lords, and he just gets lands back. I don't really care how many lands they have on the battlefield. Which is all Ramanap really does. I guess if they sack their Stomping Grounds like they did in Game 1, they could have gotten it back with Ramanap, so to let them go off with Wolfrun. But anyhow, pretty happy to see Ramanap Excavator there. Okay, well, Mutavault is another attacker, and I did need a 4th land for Master of Waves, so that was a pretty good draw, to be honest. So I think the best play here is just to attack into the Ramanap Excavator. If the opponent feels like he's really on the back foot and his only out is to hope that I don't have another Lord, maybe he blocks. So play the Mutavault and just give the opponent an opportunity to make a mistake. Swing in, see if he takes the bait. He does not, so let's go ahead and get that extra point of damage. They're not running anything like Anger of the Gods, obviously, so running out a Lord on our turn is not really a huge risk. All right, so they're going to take 3, and we'll go ahead and play the Harbinger to get some value bouncing this Hierarch. Slow their roll a little bit. We've got a pretty powerful board as it stands. I think it's 14 points between 6 with the Lords and 8 with Mutavault and Harbinger. So here's the Hierarch again. So there's a path. A little bit hasty. I guess the opponent didn't want to let me draw into counter magic. So I get an island, and one of my Lords is gone. Opponent has no good attacks, so I think I'm going to leave AEther Vial on 2. We have a lot of 2-drops in the deck. Unfortunately, that island is pretty trashy. You know, I've gotten blown out in the past by like going into attacks with Harbinger, for example, and then the opponent will play something like Blessed Alliance. I'll lose the Harbinger and then get fewer tokens with Master of Waves. So I think it's just sort of very much correct to play the Master of Waves first, get the tokens, and then if the opponent makes me sack an attacker with Blessed Alliance, then I've already gotten the elemental tokens. So let's get in with Harbinger here. Odds are the opponent's not going to block. Goes down to 10, and we're setting ourselves up for a pretty easy turn 5 win, assuming that the opponent doesn't have any kind of crazy stuff on their side. Even if they play a Knight right now, they don't have enough mana to also play Retreat, and Knight would have Summoning Sickness anyway. So use Ramanap to get one of their fetch lands back from the graveyard. They use it, go down to 8, and what's happening here? Something pretty big. Worship. This is the Masterpiece Worship, and I don't think I ever saw this art. This is pretty awesome. These guys are all bowing down to this giant here. Looks like he has a bow in his hand that's kind of hanging there behind his leg. Some pyramids. It's pretty awesome art, actually. It's kind of an obnoxious card for us to see. It says if you control a creature, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. So basically, the opponent can't die from combat. They can go down to 1. Now that makes Vapor Snag live, because if you snag one of their creatures, they lose 1 life. They lose the game right away. Unfortunately, this list doesn't play Vapor Snag, but fortunately, I did bring in 2 Echoing Truths from the sideboard. Opponent doesn't run any hand disruption or anything, so if I draw one of those Echoing Truths, we're just going to bounce this thing, swing with 8 creatures, and win. But for the time being, this is going to resolve, and I'm not going to be able to win the game. So let's continue here. Worship hits the table. Opponent still has no good blocks. And hope for something better, I guess, here. Now, Relic is solid. It doesn't answer Worship, but it does get me 1 card closer to Echoing Truth if I crack it. But since this deck's main win condition is attacking with big Knight of the Reliquaries, and they require a pretty deep graveyard, I'm just going to keep this up and just keep trimming turn after turn. And in the event that they do get a Knight of the Reliquary, I can always crack it at sort of a pivotal moment so that their guy becomes just like a 2/2 or something. Let's go ahead and try to trim something. Opponent gets rid of 1 land. Now, at this point, I can only get the opponent down to 1 life because Worship doesn't let him go below that. So they're not going to block because Worship's got their back. I'm just going to swing for exactly 7 here with Mutavault and Harbinger. If I get in with Elementals, I get to eat one of them with Ramanap, and I'm not really feeling that. Just kind of totally unnecessary. All right, so the opponent goes down to 1. We're just going to want to dig for Echoing Truth. We've got 48 cards left in the library. It's only turn 5. Just cross our fingers here. All right, so opponent's main phase, they play a Tireless Tracker. Now that could start accruing value. Important to note, however, that they are at 1 life. So they have to play carefully. Well, there's a fetch. They're not going to be now. They're going to get a clue from that land. There's some of that value. So This is a replay. Excuse me. This is a replay, but it's still pretty hilarious. I think what happened here is that the opponent was sort of sitting pretty with Worship and thought that they could just chill out for a while and start accruing value with Tireless Tracker. So they cracked a fetch land, paying 1 life, going down to 0. So, I mean, it's just pretty funny, right? I mean, I won game 1 because the opponent didn't seem to really know the deck that they were playing inside and out. I probably should have lost on turn 3 in that game. But somehow I magically won game 1. In game 2, they just ran me over. I passed on turn 2. Holding up Spell Pierce is pretty stupid. So that was a bad play on my part, but I don't think I could have won that game anyway. Now, game 3, who knows who would have won this game? I mean, Worship is really hard to deal with. They could have gotten a Knight out. I've got backup with Relic. They could have played a bunch of Kitchen Fangs, maybe some, like, what are those guys called? Fairgrounds Wardens, and like exile my Master of Waves. The game could have gone any number of ways, and there's absolutely no reason for the opponent to concede with Worship on the table. So this was almost certainly not just a silly concession. The opponent saying, I can't win, like I'm just going to kill myself like they do sometimes with Shocklands. I think it was just like one of the dumbest mistakes I've ever seen, and definitely the funniest way I've ever won against a resolved Worship. So, yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'm back on Mono Blue for the foreseeable future. It has felt really, really good after grinding for 3 months with blue-green Merfolk. I had some good times with that deck, but I had more bad times. I missed Master of Waves. I missed running a playset of Mutavaults. Mono Blue Merfolk is a really powerful deck, and going into the blue-green experiment, I always knew that the bar was set pretty high for the green cards to sort of outperform Mono Blue. But since I've been back on it for the last couple of days, it just feels way more powerful than blue-green has ever felt in any of the shapes that I ran it in. So again, thank you for watching very much. If you want to support my channel, please check out the link to my Patreon page. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Leave any comments you might have or any questions, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks again, guys. Bye.